What's up, everybody? Welcome to the NFL Brekkie Show. Now that week 3 is in the books, good Wednesday morning if you're watching in Australia, New Zealand. If you're one of our stragglers from my side of the Pacific Ocean, good Tuesday afternoon. Hey, it's Laz. We are 3 weeks in the book. We have 5 unbeaten teams remain. Had a Monday Night Football doubleheader yesterday. Bills look as impressive as anybody amongst the 3-0 teams. The Bengals, yet again, find a way to lose. They were the biggest favorites of the week and lost for the second time in 3 games, now staring at an 0-3 start with still a bunch of divisional games left. And here we are. Things are starting to settle in a little bit in terms of, I don't want to say contenders, pretenders, because it's a football cliche, and we hate those here on the NFL Brekkie Show. But, I mean, we're starting to really see the teams that what weeks were anomalies and what weren't for most, right? I feel like we're getting to that point.
I think we're working our way there. There's certain victories over teams that we had an impression of coming into the season that have started to age quite poorly. And think about teams like the Cleveland Browns that are far less impressive than we might have put particularly on paper when you look at that defense. So, yes, I think we're starting to get a feel for which teams have got a better grasp on who they are, their identity. There's your football cliche, where their strengths are of the team, really, how they're going to dictate contests, and other ones that are really, really searching for answers and are going to continually pose and present really opportunities to be taken advantage of. I think we might see that starting on Thursday Night Football this week, Friday Australian time. We'll touch on that in a bit. But we're also seeing a bit of a changing the guard at some of these key positions, and something that we're going to do over the next few weeks or months is have a couple of drafts at some spots and kind of re-rack our expectation, not our expectation, but how our expectation now meets how the reality has formulated of the top of the tree of some of these positions. Who has ascended to put themselves in that elite conversation, that top 10 conversation? Who is perhaps aging out? How are they aging out? How is their game changing? I'm going to start this week because we really did have some headline performances at the wide receiver spot. We had franchise wide receivers, being rejuvenated and really erupting into their season and really taking back their spot, saying, no, nothing's changed here. I'm still the man. We've had some players seemingly phased out in the receiving world and others step into their role on teams and in passing games. And we've had some rookies. I think the wide receiver conversation around these rookies is going to be central. And I think we're really set up, in my opinion, for one of the great offensive rookie of the year races with some of the early showings from some of that talent on the offensive side. We know it was a really offensive heavy kind of top 10 first round of the draft, and that's now playing out in performances. But we are going to start with these wide receivers, feeling nothing better than kick off than you and me, a little mono draft action, one-on-one. Really, we start to feel that heat rise in the mind games. What's he going to do? I know he thinks I'm going to do this. He knows what I think he knows. I know what he knows, but who knows? And that's what we got set up for today. Do you like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like they say if you're playing heads up, Texas Hold'em. I don't know if you're a card player.
Not a good one.
But, they say there are 3 hands in any heads up Hold'em. There's the cards I'm holding, there's the cards you're holding, and the cards you think I'm holding, and those are in reverse order of importance. So I got my cards right here, and Laz, a big impetus, I guess, of this for me, I guess affirmation of it, because you had already pitched the idea. I flew back from Cincinnati this morning. I was on the sideline for the Commanders' shock win at the Jungle and all the trepidation now that surrounds the Bengals. But they had a game on the TV. It was, Cowboys Giants from a few years back. I don't remember which year exactly, but I just got a quick glance at it. Eli Manning was still the quarterback for the Giants. But it just made me realize, you go back and you realize the top 10 for any given position are guys who were elite in their positions. It changes really quickly. And we're at a spot now, as you mentioned, with wide receivers, where there's this influx of guys who seem like they're going to be wide receiver ones, game-changing players. Where do we expect them to integrate, whether they were drafted this year last or the year before last, take like a Garrett Wilson, and say, okay, what is the top 10? And on my flight, I was doing my top 10, and there were so many guys out there I was saying, oh, gosh, absolutely, top 10, until I realized I had like 22 dudes in my top 10. So that's what makes this exercise compelling. Anybody out there, feel free to fire away in the comments section. I see Brad Bolt, friend of the show. Good morning, my guys. Good morning, Brad, and good morning to your Carolina Panthers as well. Andy Dalton, the first quarterback of any this season to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Andy Dalton. Who had that?
Wait till we get to our quarterback draft and how quickly the red rifle comes off the board.
Yeah, and my friend Gary Streisky on SportsCenter almost called him a different red nickname, and he was stopped just in time. Red Rifle. Gary. Not anything that has to do with rocket jet propulsion. Okay, so Laz, how we're doing this draft, and you explained this to me, is it's not quite snake order. We have a number 1 pick, and then it is snake for whoever has 2 has 3, but then after that it just goes onward. So if you have pick 1, you have 4, 6, 8, and 10. If you have pick 2, you have 3, 5, 7, 9. And then we're throwing in honorable mentions because we did so much damn prep for this thing. It was like, there are going to be guys out there where you and I are going to text each other like, oh, he was going to be my next guy drafted. And this is to mitigate that.
That is how I text you.
It is. That's actually, I changed the voice to text. So from your dulcet, Vaucluse raised tones of prestige, it actually comes across the other way around.
Yeah, the village lower road voice. I will say your version of my voice is the exact same version that my wife uses when she's paying me out. So good to know that you and Leash have really, got on the same page when it comes to, making fun of my, always insightful commentary.
So we have a coin flip simulator.
We do.
That I have here, right? And I can't just flip it. I guess you need to call heads or tails.
Sure. Tails, tails never fails.
Tails fails 50% of the time. And it is tails. So Laz, you have picks 1, 4, 6, 8, and 10.
I'm very happy with that. And shout out to Dexter Lawrence, who picked tails never fails, I believe. And then when it was heads, let out his own way of expressing his dismay at that. I will just say before we get going as well, how we're grading this. This is the top 10 receivers. We're going to judge this at the end of the season. At the end of the 2024 season, we're going to take a look. Who do we think the top 10 receivers are? Who was closest to? Who had the most high-ranking players? Who had the most players in that top 10? So it's not about drafting them for 5 years or 3 years or 7 years. It's not about what they've done previously. It's how we're going to view them at the end of the season. And production obviously matters. Numbers matter, but we also know there's some junk yardage. Anyone that watched that Bills shellacking of the Jaguars saw Travis Etienne. I know he's not a wide receiver, but pad some stats there in meaningless time there at the end of that game. So production matters, numbers matters, but we also do take into context just how well they're playing the game. And for some, there are going to be quarterback issues. There's going to be quarterback health issues, how that affects them. That might not really speak to how they've diminished as a talent, a wide receiver, and where they belong in these standings. So just something to keep in mind, to really make it concise, how these wide receivers will be viewed, what the top 10 will be at the end of the 2024 season. With that, with the first overall pick, I think this is an absolute chalk pick. I think there's a consensus. Justin Jefferson, come on down, much like one of my 2-1 fantasy teams, which is better than they deserve because my points for is shocking. Justin Jefferson is going to be a huge central piece on my roster. Look, talk about quarterback proof. He has obviously helped elevate Sam Darnold since coming to the Minnesota Vikings. Darnold, that is, working obviously in that Kevin O'Connell offense. The production, he hasn't even hit that kind of 12, 15 targets per week range that I think we could really get to with Jefferson over this season. But look at the way he's done it. He's had, great red zone looks and great some of his artistry and his route work in the confined parts of the field. His sideline body control, 97-yard touchdowns where it's just chuck it up there and he'll go get it. His work after the catch, his unique elastic weaving elusiveness, like everything is there for Justin Jefferson. J.J. McCarthy, Kirk Cousins, or now Sam Darnold at quarterback, it doesn't seem to matter. This man is the standard week in, week out. The consistency, how he attacks every part of the field, over the middle, tough stuff. Again, the sideline body control, the footwork along the sideline, it's simply superb. His hands, it's just his contact balance, or his ability to absorb contact at the catch point. It is all simply top tier. So Justin Jefferson, number 1 overall pick. That's all I need to say about that.
Yeah, that would have been mine, Laz, as well. Best route runner for me in the NFL, and there was concern. I was concerned. I told you on this show, on mea culpa. I said, hey, I'm gonna take the Vikings under win total prop, but I'm gonna wait till they beat the Giants in week 1. They beat the Giants in week 1. I hammered the under, and here they sit at 3-0, and Sam Darnold, looks exquisite throwing between the numbers, and now that other members of that offense are participating, I do think Jefferson's numbers are going to go up. Highest paid wide receiver, and it's borne fruit and beyond the 97-yard touchdown. So he would have been mine. Totally affirm what you're saying there. This is where it starts to get interesting for me, that number 2 and beyond. I'm happy I have 2 picks back to back here because I would have really been torn between these 2. With my first round pick, I'm going to go with Jamar Chase, 24 years young. His target total's been modest thus far, just 18 targets this season. But this is a guy all 3 years in the NFL. He's gone over 1,000 yards, shown a level of consistency. And until T. Higgins came back, he wasn't getting those targets because he was constantly facing double teams and added attention. Now with T. Higgins back in the fold, we could see yesterday 2 touchdowns for Chase in a game against the Commanders in which Joe Burrow and the offense did not lose that game. They went down and they either scored points, they had a missed field goal, Evan McPherson, but they had no turnovers, no punts for the game. And Ja'Marr Chase was the best receiver on the field. His route running is exceptional. I mentioned only 18 targets. He has 16 receptions on those 18 targets. I'm not suggesting he's going to be at an 88% clip in terms of his reception rate, but that level of consistency and reliability that he has an ability to get open. And now that there's more rapport being built between Joe Burrow, Mike Gesicki, T. Higgins looked fit. Even Zach Moss in the running game shows some things you're going to like. I don't know if I'm buying or selling yet on the Bengals being the rare team that starts 0-3 and makes the playoffs. Their division kind of sets up to where it's possible. But I do think Ja'Marr Chase is going to heat up the rest of the way and get back toward that 1,200 yard total to which we're accustomed. Maybe not in an 88% clip, but I would suggest 70 to 75% of the times Joe Burrow intends to get the ball to him. Chase comes down with it in some capacity. My second pick, 3rd overall, round 1, pick 2. I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb.
Yep.
You could have gone a couple different ways here. CeeDee Lamb finally getting paid in the offseason. Took a little while. He's been between 60 and 90 yards each game. Hasn't really had that breakout game. And unlike Ja'Marr Chase, he has 13 catches on 24 targets, darn near 50%. Where I think things are going to start to upgrade for him, Jake Ferguson showing an adeptness in the second half as Dallas darn near made a 22-point comeback in the fourth quarter against the Ravens. Having another option to whom Dak Prescott can turn will help take some of the attention off CeeDee Lamb. I think he's gifted enough and has enough rapport with Dak Prescott that the added attention isn't necessarily going to matter. And Laz, if we're talking about receivers and production, I'm worried that the Dallas Cowboys aren't going to have a ton of fourth quarter leads, at least not as many as they had a year ago. So it's going to require some games like we saw a couple days ago to close out week 3, their home loss to the Ravens, where they're having to throw late. Dak's having to play 60 full minutes, and so is CeeDee Lamb. Unlike last year when, games against the Giants, they were able to pop it neutral and rest and relax. So I do think CeeDee Lamb will be fine. We'll put up big numbers, and I have him as my second wide receiver on the Pillsbury Doughboys in this draft.
Well, as you might have seen at the bottom of the screen there, Brad agrees. So that's the top 3. That's the top 3 as I had it, and I think it gets chaotic now. And appropriately, we've got the B-League saying, hey, boys, where are the tinfoil hats? They're away this week, but if we're looking for wild, this is where I think it gets a bit
Mine's
crazy.
In my car. You never know when you're going to need it.
My next pick, and Benny G, we see you there, got a question about the Steelers. We will get to that and your prediction there that might qualify for Hot Take Hotline, I think. Okay, but while we're talking tinfoil hats, while we're talking crazy takes, this might be where we start to buck a little bit, Phil, and this might be where you start to raise your eyebrows and go, really, Loz, is this where we're going? And where we're going, where were you just now, Phil? You're in Dallas. What state is that in? Texas. I know geography. We're not leaving Texas because with the 4th overall pick in the 2024, who is going to be the top 10 wide receivers in the league draft, I am taking the Houston Texans stud Nico Collins come to town. This man is pacing the league for receiving yards. That's a production side. That's just numbers. You can box score scout. But going and watching his actual, the receptions, the targets and the receptions that he's pulled in this season, this man might have taken the mantle, and I know I'd pick Justin Jefferson 1st overall. He might have taken the mantle as the most miraculous reception maker in the league at this point. One-handed grabs, impossible feet down, impossible knee down in tight quarters. At 6'4", his ability his suddenness getting out of cuts and breaks, the toughness of the hands, he works every level of the field. You can work him in the short area, work him in quick game. You can send him deep, middle of the field, boundary. Everything that this man is doing at the wide receiver position is absolutely enthralling. He's fascinating to watch. Again, not your tip. It's a bigger build than some might be used to. Stephon Diggs has come in and hasn't slowed him down at all. So for me, just going through, I've got the notes here in front of me, and it's just obviously the quarterback situation. You feel like as long as he's healthy with CJ Stroud, is going to be stable and provide for continued production. But it's just he beats press. he eats up cushions when he's given soft coverage. He's so sudden, as I mentioned. And honestly, the way I sum this up, he makes the miraculous look mundane at this point. He's a quarterback's best friend. When CJ Stroud rolls out and completes some of these amazing throws as he's moving, maybe chucking back across field, hitting a tight sideline, it's Nico Collins he's looking at first and foremost, because Collins reacts to that second phase, that second play ability when things break down, gets himself open, presents a phenomenal target. So I know that might be earlier than some. We'll see what Brad Bolt's already on board with that. Nico, we'll see if that's too early for some folks. Send us in your comments if I've gone way off taking Nico Collins 4th overall, but I'm sitting here 1 and 4, Jefferson and Collins. It's gone chalk for me so far. Not sure if you feel like I've jumped a little there though, Phil.
And I had Collins 7th on my board. Leads the NFL in receiving yards. We know listen, he's every bit of 6'4", 100 kilos. The guy has a build that you don't realize because of how fluidly he runs. The preferred option for CJ Stroud. He would be, with what we've seen from him, probably top 3 if there weren't so many other just offensive options and weapons there. But I can't fault you for taking him 4. He could end up with 1,500 yards and lead the NFL in receiving yards. And again, this isn't exclusively a statistically based thing, but when you have somebody who's so threatening outside for a team that, despite a lopsided loss and inability to handle pressure and inability to defensively to stop Sam Darnold going over the middle, or anybody going over the middle at this point, the Houston Texans do project as an AFC South favorite and as one of the short list of teams that could keep the Chiefs out of the Super Bowl. If they are to do it, it would be a good day for Nico Collins to have a good day. He is integral to what they do offensively.
With your next pick, Phil, where are you taking us?
Oh, I forgot we're not doing true snake order. I like this because I was holding my breath. I was worried that you were going to take my guy who was number 4 on my board, a guy who was held to just 13 yards in week 1, but has really looked like himself as he and his team have seemed to found their stride a little bit. They feature on Monday Night Football. I will be in town in the Motor City for the Sun God, Amon-Ra St. Brown. All 6 feet, 202 pounds of him, Laz. He's top 3 in the NFL in receptions, top 3 in targets. And the ways in which Detroit has been utilizing Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield only gives me greater confidence that Amon-Ra's ability at different parts of the route tree to get open, Jared Goff and how well oiled that offense runs. It'll be a test this weekend against Seattle. I think there are some empty calories in the Seahawks 3-0, but we know something they do have is they do have corners who can, who are ball hawks and can create some issues there. So I do think Amon-Ra is going to have a big game in week 4 at home as Detroit tries to hand Seattle its first loss of the season. And I think over the course of the year, the 13 yards he had in week 1 will prove an anomaly, and this team will be back on track as an NFC contender. Amon-Ra and a team that, listen, Detroit's a fun team to watch too as a neutral because every freaking game is going to be, you got to get the 27 points or you don't have a chance either way. It's going to be a lot of 30-24 and 31-27 type games. So with those type of games on offer, much like my rationale for taking CeeDee Lamb with the Cowboys, in a sea of talented wide receivers, I'll take Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God, with the 3rd pick on my squad.
So I had Amon-Ra a little further down my board. I think we're seeing a bunch of the comments. Benny G, Amon-Ra is reliable as the sun rising each day. Brad had him as his number 4 overall. I had him further down. 9.9 yards of reception. He plays the game very differently. It's not exclusively slot, but it's pretty close to exclusively slot. He certainly hasn't been a lot of downfield production. He's capable of that. That's not on him. He is absolutely capable of heading downfield and creating chunk plays working from the slot, but hasn't been a great deal of that so far. For yardage, he's actually been paced by Jameson Williams, partially because of that very slow start to the season that you did mention there early on with just 13 yards in week 1. But I guess I'm looking at a little more of a complete option when I'm looking at these elite wide receivers. I had him in a bit of a section further down, but man, so consistent, so dependable, so tough. And the discipline, the determination that is part of his kind of mantra and his, to use a word that has been co-opted again, more of these words being co-opted by the young kids, but it's certainly plenty about his aura, is that kind of dogged determination. He doesn't forget how many receivers were taken ahead of him.
You just earnestly used the word aura.
but not the way they do, not the way the kids do. I'm literally
surprised
like,
you didn't, you know,
when he
back
sat
Nico
down.
Collins for his Riz.
No, easy. That's you. That's the word
never,
aura has existed for a long time.
not
The
in
word aura
my
has been used
life.
on shows, on this show for years and years and years before it became part of, TikTok parlance. Wait till parlance gets co-opted. But okay. Amon-Ra comes up, and then I've got some interesting names here because there's one to me from a health standpoint that is questionable, literally questionable. It doesn't sound like we'll see him soon yet. The talent is there, but I'm not going to go there just yet. As I look at the rest, we start to get into murky areas for me here. And again, I think I'm going to continue to buck. I'm really talking about an overhaul of this top 10. And I am going to leave the state of Texas now. I am going to leave the NFC. And I'm going to go to those Super Bowl champions, those back-to-back Super Bowl champions. So Rashee Rice is coming off the board here at the 6th overall pick. What I learned from watching Rashee Rice, all his production so far, and I'm not just saying that to be like, oh, look at how much tape. Like, I got a little heated up last night listening to a Jerry Jones interview on 105.3 The Fan. I was a little spiced up, so I had a little bit of juice. Couldn't quite go to sleep, so I sat there and watched through all these players. And Rashee Rice has taken the Travis Kelsey role. Mm-hmm. Whether we'll get into Travis Kelsey and whether he's fallen off throughout this show. There's a question about that coming in Hot Take Hotline. Spoilers. Tease, I should say. But the pivot routes, the moving across the formation, the shallow parts of the field, those downfield, cross the field routes where he's sweeping across, the secondary and finding those spots for Patrick Mahomes to layer a throw right over the top there. The motion at the point of the snap being the key, obvious number one target on key down and distances. It's all there. His red zone usage. Rashee Rice, for me, is absolutely elevated into the number one receiving role on the Super Bowl champion roster with the best quarterback in the league. The production so far, when you're looking at Rice, he's third in yards per route run. He's almost at 300 yards. These are some of the bit of the analytics and the counting stats. He's got a couple of touchdowns. He's got 24 receptions, which is more than most through 3 weeks. I think Rice, what he's able to do, adding that explosiveness, I think we talk about each year, we've done this over the time we've done the show, about the quintessential plays or the trademark plays of certain seasons, whether it's certain Christian McCaffrey runs or way back when it was the Russell Wilson rainbow deep ball. But for me, that in-breaking slant that Rashee Rice is running right now, where Mahomes is hitting him quickly and Rice has absolutely lined it up downfield. He gets north quickly and starts picking up chunk gains. That is becoming one of these not iconic, but one of these go-to moves that we're seeing week in, week out through the passing game. So I'm stoked to get Rice here. I have him at number 6 on my board. He comes off the board in the 6th. Sorry, I have him. Where are we at? We're at 6 or 7? 6, 7.
You had the first pick.
I have first. I have fourth, sixth. Thank you. Yeah. So it comes off the board 6, where I had him on the board. And I can't. I think with people looking at the Chiefs 3-0, but not the sexiest 3-0 we've seen from this type of, not the sexiest start of the season. I think that's and people focusing on, what's going on with Kelsey? Pacheco's out. How are they going to replace that? Patrick Mahomes throwing interceptions, a little too much regularity. I think that's kind of shaded over just how good Rice has been. And I know we do have some agreement here because Benny G actually thinks that Rashee Rice finishes ahead of Nico. So he's got to be happy with me getting both of them. So that's who comes off the board at 6 for me. Definitely a youth movement going on, and I see upheaval in this top 10.
Well, I had him at 10. I was hoping to get him with my final pick, which would have been 9th. But I should have known that you would have gotten him earlier because I knew you were high on Rashee Rice. Mm-hmm. What I will say is I don't think, if he were to plop into most other rosters and most other offenses tomorrow, certainly wouldn't have the same productivity. But given the NFL's increasing reliance on 2 high safety looks, the fact that Xavier Worthy is not a secret anymore, teams are going to try and take away what he does deep. That in-breaking route that Rashee Rice runs, as you mentioned, is just going to feast every opportunity he gets. We saw that on Sunday Night Football against the Falcons. Rice quickly becoming one of Patrick Mahomes' favorite targets, and with Isaiah Pacheco out, for the foreseeable future, as is Hollywood Brown. It's a vacuum. Someone's going to have to get those stats. I think it's going to be Rashee Rice. So in terms of fit and importance to what they're doing this year, I think his is going to be a consistent role in which. Go ahead.
I also don't want to conflate it with, this is not Slant Boy 2.0. This is not Michael Thomas 6 yards fall down. There's explosiveness to this. He also has the ability to take it deep down the sideline.
He's second in the NFL in receiving yards, so it's not all like,
Yeah, he has deep touchdown passes with gorgeous connection with Patrick Mahomes down the sideline, beating that one-on-one coverage against the boundary. So he can do it, and that's what's actually interesting is that he's working so much of this intermediate and short part of the field. As he takes on really this Travis Kelsey route tree and the Travis Kelsey central role in the passing game. But when you go back and watch his SMU highlights, like this is a improvisation, go up and get it, violent cuts after the catch. But he was an absolute high point savant back at SMU with the way he could elevate above the rim, snatch that thing and create chunk plays. So that is in his game as well. Maybe we do see a little difference in his ceiling there, but I'm happy with him coming off the board. And whilst I think it might raise a few eyebrows, maybe he's not in some people's top 10. I think once the proof is done, it's at the end of this 2024 season. I think there's going to be a whole lot of how much money we're going to have to pay Rashee Rice conversations happening.
Because they have him for 2 years after this, I believe. But to your point, he hasn't been below 75 yards in any game. I think maybe he and Nico Collins are the only two who can say that. Just that mark of consistency. Hey, if your receiver goes out and gets 7 catches, 75 yards, I know it's not winning you a fantasy week, but from a team standpoint, you can't be disappointed. That's not a dud for anybody ever. So he's somebody who 3 weeks, 3 wins. He went triple digits in 2 of those games for Kansas City, most notably this past week 3. Laz, somebody who I'm taking with my 4th pick is somebody to whom I believe you alluded about injury concern.
Yeah.
And that is number 11 for the Philadelphia Eagles. I had him 5th on my board with the caveat that his injury isn't going to take him out for much longer, and that is A.J. Brown. We saw 119 yards on 10 targets in week 1 and a touchdown in Brazil, and we haven't seen him since because he got injured the Friday before a Monday Night Football loss to the Falcons. And you can see the importance that just his presence outside has to that offense. Dallas Goedert was prolific in his 10 catches on 11 targets, but the one that defined the game and frankly won the game was the one on a 3rd and 16. The Saints were in man for some reason. 2 guys ran into each other. He had a 61-yard catch and run that, despite the urges and motivation of Jordan Mailata, go son, unhook the trailer, Dallas Goedert couldn't quite get over the finish line. But when A.J. Brown comes back, I think we're going to see the form that we saw the past 2 years. Now, missing 2 games, I'm not going to say he's going to be at that 1,400-yard total he's been each of the last 2 years, but at somebody who's 27, he's in his athletic prime. He's a big-bodied guy, but again, runs like he's a smaller player. He's bang on 100 kilos. He's 6'1". So consistent in the red zone, so consistent in the middle of the field, on the sideline, physical, fits what this team wants to do. And some of those YOLO balls that Jalen Hurts throws that right now there isn't that person to bring it down, A.J. Brown will be there at some point. So, again, the caveat that he's hurt, haven't put him on IR, hope that he will return in the next week or 2.
Yeah.
But this is a season projection for me for a team that I think is going to win the NFC East and is going to do it having to win some close games, or he's called upon in the 4th quarter, whereas some other dominant teams, that may not be the case.
Yeah, on my board, I did have A.J. Brown and Rashee Rice tags touching. I had A.J. Brown coming into this morning just to touch ahead, but hearing that hamstring still doesn't seem like it's, it doesn't sound like we're getting a return this week. Just that just gnaw at me a little bit there, because hamstrings, those soft tissue injuries, I appreciate that they're taking the time to get it right, but it does make me hesitant about him coming off the board at the point I had there, where I had Rice as an option as well, having them so close, but he would have been the next pick that I would have made. So, we only have that 1 game of sample size, but what didn't you like there? He did stuff in the short part of the field. He creates the huge, explosive quintessential A.J. Brown long-range touchdown with yards after the catch. He's big, he's powerful, strong. He's so crisp and precise and clean for someone his size with that just explosive movement. So it's a fantastic pick. Maybe I do come back to this is the benefit of doing it 3 weeks into the season, is that hopefully we get these guys back soon, and injuries that may have impacted in the first 3 weeks aren't really part of the equation when we do our judgment at the end of the 2024 season. Okay, to me, that would be pick 8 now for me, Phil. Am I counting still correctly? I'm back on the even train.
Yep.
So I have a name here that from a total, if you're just looking at the stats standpoint, it's not blowing anyone away just yet. I think, it's been a slower start, particularly, through the first 3 weeks, but I think we've got an ascendant passing game here. I think we've got a passing game that I think put the fear through a lot of the AFC in what they put down to kick off week 3, and that is the New York Jets. And I'm going to take Garrett Wilson off the board here. There's not a part of the route tree that he cannot attack and execute with. Just the bounding athleticism with which he plays the game. We saw the detail in that, the precise connection he had with Aaron Rodgers in the red zone and the ability to get the ball in. This is not a revolutionary play, but it just shows you the complete nature of this receiver. We've seen already this season back shoulder balls. We've seen him attack it down the field. Only 150 yards on the season, far less production. He doesn't have 2/3 of production of someone like Rashee Rice so far this season, but I think this is ascending. I think what we saw from the Jets, their ability to keep Aaron Rodgers clean, Aaron Rodgers improving mobility, it would seem, and we know where that arm still is with some of the throws he's put on tape. There's no lack of zip there in one of the greatest quarterback arms we've seen in the league. So I'm going to happily take Garrett Wilson. I'm not scared off by any Alan Lazard or Mike Williams target share there. I think the production is coming. I think the talent is absolutely obvious in there. And again, I think this is someone that this is probably a less surprising pick had you gone into week 1 picking top 10 receivers. I think more people would have had a Garrett Wilson above perhaps the other two young players that I've thrown in there, Nico Collins and Rashee Rice. But I'm happy to take Garrett Wilson off the board here. Again, if you're looking, there's a bit of consistency with the level of quarterback I've tied myself to here. Aaron Rodgers, all right, Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, and of course, Sam Darnold.
Well, Oz, I had Garrett Wilson number 9. You taking him at 8, I can't fault that. That just like that angle of Aaron Rodgers' touchdown pass to Garrett Wilson, where the ball kind of just barely drew outward away from the defender, perfectly placed. It's just that's going to be the kind of thing that's going to frustrate defenses as long as Aaron Rodgers remains quarterback of the Jets. It's an enticing matchup this weekend. Patrick Surtain against Garrett Wilson. As a Broncos supporter, I wish they weren't facing the Jets on added rest, because Aaron Rodgers in these mini buy situations on both ends, he's terrific in the Thursday night, Friday morning window. And then the games afterwards, he's also magnificent. So he's just got the weird week cadence figured out unlike anybody else. For all the criticisms of how he prepares himself in the offseason and in season, something's working. So maybe we send some ayahuasca to Bo Nix and see how that pans out. Laz, I'm gonna deviate from my ranking here, only because in my soul I want this guy, and I'd be pissed if you took him at 10, and I think you may. It would be deviating from your protocol thus far, the Rodgers Mahomes.
Oh, interesting.
Because this guy's quarterback probably isn't going to have a job at his current team next season.
Yeah, I think I know where we're going here.
But I'm gonna have Malik Nabers jump the queue a little bit.
Yeah.
Because particularly watching the Browns game, this guy is unstoppable in man coverage. He's top 3 in the NFL in receptions. I think he leads the league in targets. But Daniel Jones in that game in particular, those short passes inside of 5 air yards was as efficient as we've ever seen him, 20 for 23. He was 6 for 7 with a touchdown targeting Malik Nabers. And I think that's going to be what the Giants turn to with regularity. I don't think the Giants are going to be very good. I think this is a 4-win, 5-win team, but they did get one in Cleveland, which I don't know how much that says at the moment. But Malik Nabers at age 21 is getting better by the week, which is scary because I think he leads the NFL in terms of fantasy points at the wide receiver position through 3 weeks.
Him and someone drawing Jerry Rice comparisons, Juwan Jennings.
Yeah. Juwan Jennings, despite his touchdown hat trick. We have some 49ers hot takes coming up in the hot take hotline as well.
We certainly do.
But Malik Nabers has had no fewer than 66 receiving yards in any game. And I always look at that number, funny enough, because in the 16-game schedule, 66 yards times 16, that makes you a 1,000-yard receiver. So if that's his floor through 3 games, for somebody who's really starting to develop some measure of rapport with Daniel Jones, and Jones is starting to build some confidence, and we've seen what Singletary can do out of the backfield, if given a little bit of head of steam and just cause defenses to be a little bit more honest with how they defend Nabers, I just want to see where it goes. I want him on the squad. Mm-hmm. I had him number 12 when I initially did this, but like I said, I'd be really salty if he took him at 10. So I'm taking him now.
Okay, I have him at 9, so I love the pick. He would have been my next pick. I think the point you made there about how he's getting better every week. Brian Dable and his staff have caught plenty of flack, particularly last season, but something that I really liked in week 1, you saw him kind of on the move at the point of the snap or pre-snap motion to get him away from any kind of too tight coverage, any press coverage, give him some easier releases to get him into the game. Being a rookie receiver, that's always a great idea for your offensive coordinator or your head coach to put you in those positions to succeed like that. But that's shifted. You're now seeing him in more static one-on-one matchups outside, facing press coverage, being able to beat it off the line with his just explosive quickness. There's more polish than you might have expected. He was not a bad route runner in college, but perhaps he didn't get the precise moniker that some of the other receiving talent in this draft class did. But his explosive ability, his the ability to make miraculous tough catches, the yak, his receiving, his work after the catch, through contact and around contact, and just beating secondaries and making them look foolish with the ball in his hand. That was all there.
Might be a concern in Week 4's opener against the Cowboys.
Yeah, we might touch on that in a bit, but the glorious Swan Lake-esque movements through the air, the acrobatics, the grace with which he twisted and came down with the ball in the back corner of the end zone. I mean, there's so much to like, so much to love there about what Malik Nabers is showing, and it is increasing. Not to mention, he's going to have 400 targets this year, and he's mossing guys as well. The sideline balls where he's literally ripping it off the cornerback's head and saying, "No, that's my thing. Leave it alone." So there's so much to like there. We've got we're getting into some of the DK disrespect. In these studios, Gina's one of the most efficient QBs and deep balls to DK. They're real and they're spectacular. It's a great line. John, he's on my board. We're not done yet. I've got my last pick, and then we've each got an
Are you taking DK then, Laz?
No, I am not.
He's on my board, but I'm not going to get to him.
I'm making a tactical play here with the final pick, the 10th pick. And that is that when we do sit here at the end of the 2024 season and look back at who the best 10 receivers in the draft, whether this man gets a quarterback to come and play or whether it's going to be Tim Boyle the rest of the way, we will touch on that. Tyreek Hill is going to be on that list. Look, on the field, I don't have any questions about whether his skills have diminished in any way whatsoever. Off the field, you can absolutely have your concerns about Tyreek Hill. I have absolutely espoused those. But if we're looking at this ranking and drafting the top 10 wide receivers, I do think that we do see a move at quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. We'll touch on that in a bit. But Tyreek Hill is going to be in that conversation. He is coming into the season. He was in the conversation. Forget in the conversation as top wide receiver in the league. He was the NFL top 100. If you put value in that list, he was the number 1 player. So Tyreek Hill is going to be my pick at number 10. And I think that balances out what I've put together a little bit as well, because I went, Jefferson was an obvious chalk pick at 1. Definitely went a youth movement with my next 3 picks, and then finishing it off with a player that's up in, tickling around the 30 number, but has redefined what speed can do in an offense with or without a powerful quarterback or a powerful quarterback arm at the helm there. So Hill is my pick there, and we'll go to our auto subs, our wild cards, our injury replacements here with our honorable mention. Phil, it's back to you.
Yeah, Laz, I had the player I'm about to take 1 spot ahead of Tyreek Hill. I was all over Tyreek Hill last year with our prop special preseason. I took the over on all the props, and I was very happy with how comfortably those hit. My concern is, and why I didn't pick him, is exactly what you mentioned. Who's throwing him the ball? We're going to go into that in the hot take hotline. We haven't talked a lot about the Tua injury because of the immediacy of it. My biggest concern with how Tua got hurt was that it seemed like a pretty routine tackle. There was nothing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was a crackback on a pick or something where some big blow up where he got whipped down to the ground.
It wasn't Geno Stone's hit on Monday Night Football last night.
Yeah, that I felt that from 30 yards away. That was the whole sideline went ooh, and like
legal.
No flag, it was clean. It wasn't a play like that. It was a routine tackle. So if whether Miami errs on the side of caution, or I don't want to say errs on the side of caution because that implies something if he comes back after 4 weeks that they're not. If Tua and or Miami decide they're going to shut him down for the season or for a large portion of the season, or if he comes back, there's going to be that holding of the breath every time he goes up to take upfield on a run or takes a hit. There isn't going to be a situation in which they ever relax because it was such a routine tackle on which he got hurt. And with somebody with a long list of concussion issues, that is going to be, we had just relaxed after the 2022 season when he had 2, probably 3. And then we got through 2023. How's he going to fare? Okay, made it through a whole season, and then we're a game and 3 quarters in. So for this exercise, I am really worried who's going to be throwing the ball in Miami, and none of Skylar Thompson or Tim Boyle or whoever else is kicking around out there. None of them inspire much confidence that Tyreek Hill is going to be at a top 10 level in terms of contribution and impact this year. And that's got to be frustrating for Dolphins fans if that's the case. The guy I had one spot ahead, my honorable mention, somebody who in the last 6 years, his lowest receiving yard total was 997. And that was only because that season he was limited to 12 games. 31 years young at Davante Adams, despite rumors about Gardner Minshew getting benched, et cetera, et cetera. There are going to be some empty calories here as well. They're going to be, I think the Raiders are going to be trailing late, down 10 points, keeping the receiver in, some cover 4, cover 3, where he's able to pick up some catches and yards. But he is somebody who is a mark of consistency, a hallmark of consistency in this league. So if I'm looking at if somebody goes down and I need somebody to auto sub in, give me somebody who's going to auto sub in, 85 catches for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, Davante Adams. I feel safe. That is I'm going conservative with my fill-in pick. Not somebody who I think is going to be in any kind of player of the year conversations, but I think we're going to see 1,089 yards, 7 touchdowns on 87 grabs. That's going to be Davante Adams this year, like it is every year.
I think it's fair enough. He's right around that mark for me as well. And look, there's also a chance, we're talking about chances, things can happen, players can be acquired. There's a chance he gets traded to a much better situation at some point this season. That there's a chance that this pick ages quite well as his circumstances change. Watching Davante Adams, he's still so fantastic. Early on in the first, couple of weeks of the season, definitely felt like it was just a lot of short stuff, a lot of quick outs, a lot of work over the middle, go try and get his 5 yards, see if he can get us to the chains. Saw that expand a little bit as we got into, the past week. He's not the same explosively slippery yak threat that he was back in the day, but he's still so good at what he does. The body control, the toughness, sideline awareness. There's still so much of the game that he's an absolute. His hands. There's a level to his command of the position that has not aged in any way. I think he's still worth in this conversation the top 10 for sure. If he was in better circumstances, maybe we'd feel stronger about taking him in that bona fide top 10 picks and those better circumstances. It's not out of the realms of possibility that could come. All right, we've gone long here. We're already past 40 minutes, so we need to keep moving. My last one, to make it quick. You took Nabers. You said 31 years old just then with Adams. I'm going back to 22 years old. Marvin Harrison Jr. is my auto sub here. Had him firmly in the top 10. The size, the quickness, precision, the releases, the hands, the body control. The second phase, we talk about second phase reaction ability, helping out your quarterback, Kyler Murray, who's playing phenomenal football. Some of his best football of his career, even in a tough loss to the Detroit Lions. I think Nabers is going to go strength to strength to strength. I mentioned at the top, I think the offensive rookie of the year battle this year is going to be fantastic. It's going to be tantalizing. Those two are key pieces, Nabers and Harrison. I'm very happy to have him as my auto sub here as the youth movement in my top 10 at the wide receiver position continues in 2024. We'll move it on. We do have Brad submitted his top 10, which is JJ, Chase, Lamb, Amon-Ra, Tyreek. So he's got to be happy with me getting him at 10. Nico, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Tay Adams. And he's got Mike Evans in there. And Mike Evans has one big week, 2 quiet weeks. That was an interesting one. A big Mike
That's
Evans.
Always Mike Williams or Mike Evans. That's always him.
It's always him.
Yeah. Well, the year the Bucs were in the Super Bowl 55, right? 55?
Mm-hmm.
We looked at his numbers, and he was averaging. He was again 1,000-yard receiver. Go figure. But the average and the median were completely different. It was 2 games. It was 40, 40, 120, and that's just his cadence for 10 years, and he's going to go to the Hall of Fame because of it. He'll be at 1,000 yards. I mean, I thought about him as my stopgap. I just thought Tay Adams is marginally better, which it seems like Brad Bolt agrees. Yeah, exactly.
And something that it's interesting to look at so far is that new offensive coordinator there in Tampa Bay, Liam Cohen. We are seeing the return of Chris Godwin, the slot monster. He is being peppered with targets in that vertical yak, get north, powerful running after the catch ability he has. We've seen that really return. And from a target standpoint, just wondering if we're seeing the swing back towards Chris Godwin after, a couple of years where perhaps he didn't take the next step that people had projected after his first couple of years in the NFL. But that's just one that held me back from making the swing at Mike Evans there. But I mean, the man is ageless. He's a phenomenal bastion of red zone player of every just big body wide receiver, explosiveness, able to attack, graceful work on the sideline, elevates above the rim, obviously shields off and boxes out wide receivers, and has always had, slightly underrated speed. This is a guy who had that kind of 4.4, 4.45 speed coming out at his massive size. So even as he's got to the 30s, this is still someone moving at a very, very, very good clip and able to attack all over the place. So much respect to Mike Evans. I just think where that offense currently has held me back from popping him into my top 10. But that wraps up the draft. As we list it all out here, and we'll share these ones. For yourself, it was Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Brown, Malik Nabers, and Devontae Adams as your super sub flex option there. Your honorable mention. I think there's probably more name brand. I think if we throw this out to a poll, I won't be surprised if you get the nod there, but we shall see what it looks like at the end of 2024. And for me, the youth movement, Justin Jefferson, the chalk pick at the top, Nico Collins, Rashee Rice, Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill as the 10th and final pick in the top 10, and then Marvin Harrison back to the youth movement there with my wild card option as we close out the top 10 wide receiver draft.
That is our top 10 wide receiver draft, Laws. We will put that out there and see what the people think. It is the people's show. And since it is the people's show, it is now time to give the people a voice. It is the Hot Take Hotline presented by Macca's. And Laws, we have a couple quarterback submissions.
Uh-huh.
The Miami Fighting Fish. I think dolphins are a mammal, technically. The Miami Fighting Mammals need Russell Wilson, period, or Joe Flacco, period, now, period, from Stu. Your thoughts?
They need something, as I mentioned. I mean, just talk about Tyreek Hill. I think the answer, if this is an increasingly extended time away from the game, and that is a fluid situation, I don't think you can go to Skylar Thompson when healthy. He got roughed up in that game, or Tim Boyle. I think you need another option. I think there's certainly some romanticization of the Joe Flacco return last year. It was a lot of fun because there were a lot of chaotic plays that he made as well with the Cleveland Browns. It wasn't, all-world performance, 14 touchdowns, 10 picks, kind of 85.5 passer rating. So it wasn't, I think we have a fond memory of it, especially with the beard and off the couch. I would prefer to see Joe Flacco there over Russell Wilson. My belief in Russell Wilson, what he could do, making decisions over the middle of the field, making clean decisions over the middle of the field with the speed with which, Tua in this offense is really set up for, doesn't really, it doesn't mesh well in my mind. Looking into some of the success rate stats, it was interesting. On throws 2.5 seconds or quicker, Flacco was 25th in success rate last year. Russ was actually 15th. Flacco was 30th in completion percentage over expectation on those under 2.5 second throws, those quick throws. Russ was 23rd, neither lighting it on fire, but Russ slightly ahead of Joe Flacco. But if I'm looking for someone who can read things quickly, who can read it out, who's seen all the coverages we need, make quick decisions. And I think Joe Flacco would say, not really willing to take a lot of hits behind a shoddy offensive line, so looking to get the ball out quickly. I'd lean towards Flacco, but I'm not overwhelmed by either of these options, to be frank, and there might be better out there.
Yeah, last year, Tua Tagovailoa had comfortably the fastest average release time of any quarterback in the NFL for the season, 2.36 seconds. The cutoff you gave is the common cutoff for the metric, 2.5 seconds, which would have ranked second behind Tua if that number were, flat out, which is how we know Miami operates. It's quick throw, quick throw, quick throw. Once the defense starts to step forward, we have Waddle or Hill over the top or Raheem Mostert on a swing pass. It's just they are very once they're in that cadence, that jab haymaker cadence. My Broncos will tell you last year it can get ugly really fast. But neither of those quarterbacks mentioned, I think, fit that. You talk about the CPOE and all that, and Russ maybe a slight edge on the 2.5 seconds. The 45 quarterbacks qualified by NFL Next Gen Stats, both of them ranked in the bottom 7 in terms of fastest average release time. Both of them were north, on average, of 3 seconds. With how that offense operates and how that offensive line is built, that's not going to fly. So you look at guys who have a little bit faster of a release time, who are available. I mean, Mac Jones, if the Jags are keen to make a trade, and Mac Jones, he's better than Skylar Thompson. He's better than Tim Boyle.
He is.
Des Ridder, I still have worries about accuracy concerns. They can sign him off the Cardinals practice squad.
Hugely.
Ryan Tannehill is a name that jumps out.
Yeah.
Except for Tannehill's on record as saying, hey, I don't want to go somewhere to fix something for 3 weeks. I'm content with where I'm at on my couch unless I get the keys for the season. And so unless we're in a scenario in which the Dolphins shut down Tua for the year, or he decides to shut himself down for the year, whatever that looks like, I don't think Tannehill is a realistic option there, which from a football schematic standpoint, it makes sense because not only is Tannehill, he can get the ball out a little faster than some of the other guys that were mentioned here, Flacco and Wilson. He's fleet of foot. You forget, he was a college wide receiver at Texas A&M before being drafted 10th overall. So he's somebody who is mobile, who is accurate, veteran in the league, can lead a locker room. And I think if you were a player on the Dolphins, a Tyreek Hill, a Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, you'd take him in with measure of excitement. But I don't think it's something Tannehill would entertain unless he were told flat out, you are our starter through the rest of 2024. We're going to sign you to a 1-year deal for $15 million or whatever it would be. Adam Schefter threw out a Zach Wilson today. Somebody the Broncos may consider dealing to the Dolphins. Denver needs some draft capital. I guess that would get like a 6th or 7th round pick, maybe. Yep. The problem with Zach Wilson is he's 2.91 seconds on average per release, which isn't barely better than Wilson or Flacco. And I don't think that would go well behind that offensive line. So there isn't a perfect solution for Miami. But what I do know, Laz, is what they have is not working, and it will not keep pace with the Jets or the Bills in the AFC East.
Two of the big names that have been brought up, Bryce Young, Brad just brought up there. Bryce Young in Miami, everyone is happy. The problem is, Bryce Young wasn't exactly making quick, clean decisions in Carolina, and you put
Andy Dalton was half a second faster in his one start than Young was through 2 starts.
And do you really want to be putting him behind another troubled offensive line? Despite the fact that
Miami wouldn't throw the ball deep. You got Tyreek Hill. You're not going to throw the ball more than 10 yards.
Do you look at one of the Cowboys backups? You've got both Cooper Rush and Trey Lance there. Trey Lance doesn't seem to fit the bill there. I don't think quick, accurate decision-making has been the strength of his game. I think the best we've seen from him in the preseason action in Dallas is when he's tucked the ball and run. And then Tom Brady is the other big name that people are going to ask about, particularly considering the noted flirtations that the Miami Dolphins had with Tom Brady that cost them capital way back when on the illustrious boat. This is again, I don't think Tom Brady's coming out of retirement. There's all the talk about his, potential Raiders ownership stake. But additionally, let's talk offensive line. We saw Tom Brady, whilst the arm still had some juice to it, his presence in the pocket had really declined in terms of his ability to take hits, his willingness to take hits, how often he'd crumple and hit the deck when the pressure came. And again, in that offense, I think he can obviously make quick decisions and he can obviously make accurate decisions, both mentally and accurate delivery with the football. But that one doesn't fit. I don't think there's a natural fit out here. I think it's an awkward position for the Dolphins to find themselves, and maybe the best solution is go with a familiar face in Ryan Tannehill, who's stoic in the pocket, who's tough in the pocket, and he's going to need to be in that situation, but does have enough of the arm left to make some strikes down the field. And we know he's always been willing to work all parts of the field. He's been a willing middle of the field thrower as well throughout his time.
Well, Laz, let's keep going with Ryan Tannehill. The next take on the Hot Take Hotline is from @HallPunt. I always have to say these in my head because I don't like a Seymour Butts situation.
Naturally.
@HallPunt saying Ryan Tannehill will have more TDs this year than Russell Wilson. And then this is the Macca's Hot Take Hotline. He ordered a large fry to go. Also, the Cowboys to go under 500.
So the latter half of that isn't a hot take. Let's just I'm dealing with that right away. That's not a hot take.
Let's take that. We'll address that one first. And I looking at the schedule, you start to worry because the Cowboys have 6 division games left starting this week against a team against whom Dak's won his last 12 starts. The Giants, great.
Yeah.
Washington isn't looking like the easy out you might have thought they were in the preseason with Jaden Daniels' accuracy, his confidence, and most notably Brian Robinson's ability to run between the tackles. Cincinnati learned that all too well. And then you look at the out of division games. I mean, you already saw they got the NFC South. So that's Tampa, Atlanta, as they start to get legs underneath them. That's not automatic. And even, I don't know, Carolina didn't suck with Andy Dalton through one game. Then you got Cincinnati.
Might have Jonathan Brooks back by then too.
San Francisco, Houston. Not a lot of automatic wins, Laws, for a 1-2 team whose win over the Browns is starting to age like milk. I want to say Dallas is going to get above 500 to 9-8. It's just going to take, it will take market improvement. And this starts to go back to the fact that they did bleep all in the offseason in terms of building the team. I mean, like their most notable move was what? Bringing in Ezekiel Elliott. They don't have a running back. I mean, they've been lucky they've been playing from behind so they can throw it in the fourth quarter because if they were in a game where it's, hey, we need to run the 4-minute offense and move the sticks, it's going to be screen passes because I don't know that they can trust either Ezekiel Elliott or Rico Dowdle on his 20th carry to really get the ball over the line. I mean, I think Hall Punt has a case with that. The first half, Tannehill, Russell Wilson. I mean, we know he's going to wear shoulder pads and eye black if he's inactive, so he's got his football cosplay there. I think he's going to get more snaps than Tannehill unless a team comes up and gives Ryan the keys for the whole season. So I disagree with the first part only because I know Tannehill's stance on that. I agree with the second part. Cowboys, very real threat. They don't get to 9 wins.
All right, I agree with the first half. I want chaos to reign with whatever the solution is around the Dolphins, and I think Ryan Tannehill is an intriguing one. And I just don't think Russell Wilson is getting that job off Justin Fields. I think Mike Tomlin's playing it very close to the vest right now, saying there's no need to name anyone a permanent starter right now, delaying that until Russ is fully fit. But with the way the Steelers are going and the gradual, we know that's so defensive led with what the Steelers have done, getting to 3-0, and also benefits of not the most tough schedule and Justin Herbert leaving a game injured, but still 3-0 is 3-0. There are, in the top 10 in the power rankings for a reason, but Justin Fields adding more to his plate, actually throwing over the middle, actually having some anticipatory throws. This is starting to build nicely. As for the Cowboys side of things, though, Phil, look, I tipped them to miss the playoffs coming into this season. I have spoken at length about their organizational malpractice in March and in April and through the offseason and with delayed deals and Jerry Jones' insistence that can't afford to pay Derrick Henry, which is factually incorrect at any point of the season. You can make deals work. Even whether you're on board with paying running backs or not, that wasn't factually correct. You can move money around whether you make those Lamb and Dak deals later or if you make them earlier, then you have more cap space to work with, all that. But we're at this point now with the Cowboys where Jerry Jones is going on radio shows and offering word salad answers to questions about the state of the team and winding up in stories talking about how they didn't draft Randy Moss back in the day, but the late Jim Garrett, Jason Garrett's dad, insisted that they did and they didn't, and that's something that you can't lament but you learn from. This is what we're getting. And then Mike McCarthy is apologizing to members of the Dallas media for snippy responses when asked about how you address the fact that players are talking about accountability, professionalism, and details And the players are speaking about that, asked about that at a presser, offering a snippy response and then apologizing to the press. But in his response, saying things like, oh, the press, talking to a particular media member, you must have practiced that question. Well, at least it's visible that someone looks like they're practicing in Dallas, because you're not seeing that from the Dallas Cowboys. So, yeah, them going under 500, not a hot take to me. I'm fully on board with that. And I think this is just the latest symptom, this performance, these last 2 weeks, these back-to-back now home defeats in really calamitous showings with massive early leads and maybe some padding of the stats late in 2 of those 3 contests. If you think about this Ravens game and the Packers game in the playoffs last season, this is just the latest symptom of an organization that's running behind the pack, playing catch up, but not knowing exactly what they're trying to catch up to.
Yeah, Laz, there's a lot there. Well, I mean, again, you know the Cowboys inside and out, and we seem to agree with where we are. Yeah, I mean, we saw. I think we can move on.
We can. I think we can. But we can stay in the division, technically.
At Oz Sports Fan. Oh, yeah, I guess we do. At Oz Sports Fan. Maybe the wrong Kelsey brother retired. This is in the spirit of the hot take hotline.
This is good gear right here. Good areas.
The right amount of picante.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying Jason Kelsey should not have retired. I support Cam Jurgens and his endeavors. And Jason seems to be having a good old time as a member of the broadcast media. But Travis Kelsey, something you and I talked about. I think this is where the take comes in. Latter half of last season, you and I were saying on this show, Hall of Famer, short list of best to ever play the position. He looked old. Over the last 9 weeks of the regular season, average for Travis Kelsey was 5 catches and 45 yards a game. 4 catches, 45 yards a game, somewhere in that neighborhood, with 1 touchdown over the last 9 weeks. That is influence unbecoming of an all-time great at your position. Now, in the playoffs, I mean, that production damn near doubled. He was magnificent throughout that playoff run, that Super Bowl run, particularly in the AFC Championship game when he could not be defended. Now we've regressed back to regular season Travis Kelsey. And if he's storing it up for January, awesome. But he is not an impact player on this offense currently.
No, he's not. And when we talked about Rashee Rice, when I took him nice and early in our top 10 wide receiver draft, it's obvious watching that Rashee Rice has taken those routes and that role, that central role of the passing game. You can look at the sideline photos where he looks, tired, or he looks, less than enthused or upset or not satisfied with how things are going for himself on the field. But that could also just be someone, in their zone, in a calm state on the sideline. So I like not to overhype those type of shots we get from afar where we don't have a lot of context. But I think the way I'm going to look at this take is I think there's a massive, massive claim that, and there's a massive case that Jason Kelsey, if he was on the field with the Philadelphia Eagles this season, would be having a more significant role and making a more significant contribution than Travis. Travis, we touched on 8 receptions, 12 targets, 69 yards through 3 weeks. In games where they have needed to pass the ball, there's been scripts where they've needed to pass the ball, and there's been some production that's been called back, and there's some added context there. But I think if you're looking at what Jason Kelsey would be doing out there, still playing at a really, really top-end elite level at the center spot, I think he'd be making a more significant contribution. He's happy in his retirement. He's moved on into an illustrious, as you mentioned, career in the media, multi-platform superstar. But it certainly feels like for Travis Kelsey, this doesn't feel like last year where there were flashes of the athleticism and there were signs that it was still there, that they were kind of saving things, and that's what played out in the playoffs. This is starting to feel a little bit different, not just because the numbers are down, but ostensibly on film, the role has changed.
Laz, let's keep going. We'll do 2 more on the hot take hotline before we get to popular demand.
Indeed.
This one's a little too spicy for my liking. 49ers are going to fire Shanahan and Lynch after the season.
This is wild.
Corey. Well, I don't know that it's the craziest thing. I mean, we've seen, you look at I was looking today at head coach hot seats and stuff, and Kevin Stefanski was listed. And it's like, man, this guy was coach of the year 3 games ago. I would have given the vote to Nico Ryans, but
he's got 2 of the last 4.
Far off, and he's number 7 in terms of hot seat. So things can turn quickly. But that said, with San Francisco, the super yak bros are all, I mean, they got hit with the turtle shell. No Kittle, no Debo, no McCaffrey. It is slim pickings in terms of
Hargrave is out now. Like,
it's, I mean, that NFC West, man, the Rams as well getting decimated with injury. Now that said, despite Jawan Jennings' superhuman, Herculean, Terrell Owens-ian effort as the receiver in that game, San Francisco blew a 14-point second-half lead to a Rams offense without Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. But that dropped Kyle Shanahan's record with San Francisco up 14 or more in the second half, dropped it from 50-0 to 50-1. I'm going to give some grace. And there's concern about this McCaffrey injury. If you're flying to another continent to get an Achilles looked at, man, I'm not putting you a little Q next to your name and an injury report. That's a D or an O. But San Francisco, for them, it just needs to be wild card survival. Just get into the dance, and then hopefully you have McCaffrey back. And at that point, his body's rested, and this is a dangerous team. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, if they are not a member of the San Francisco staff next year, it's by their own volition.
Yeah, I just don't see. One, we've got an and situation here. It's not either or, it's an and. And two, unless that offense with Purdy at the helm falls away completely and there's signs that, Shanahan, who's been the most influential offensive mind in this generation, as a passing off from his father's work before him, unless that narrative changes completely and the entire league figures out how to stop a Shanahan offense, I just don't see that playing out. Especially because this does have, some year from hell vibes to it for the injuries that they're currently weathering. We are only 3 weeks into the season, and the massive contributions that they have lost from some of the key explosive cogs in that offense. And I mentioned Hargrave as well, and defense, they're suffering some hits as well. So no, it's too spicy for me, but I do appreciate the effort. But while we are on coaches, we've got a double one here. Okay, so Kieran, friend of the show, Kieran Shager, has sent in fantastic questions over our years of the Brekkie Show. Doug Peterson, first head coach to get turfed. They're 0-3, obviously, in 2024 and 1-8. I've got them over the last 9 games. Excuse me if my math is wrong. And I do want to pair that up with one we just got in from Stu. Does Coach Billy B, a.k.a. Bill Belichick, greatest head coach, at least of the modern era, end up in A, Jacksonville, B, New York, or C, Dallas? I just want to touch, I think we've got a 3-horse race as it currently stands. Love the time I got to spend in Jacksonville. Love the time I got to speak to head coach Doug Peterson. But the reality is,
did you love it? You were there for a hurricane loss.
I was there they were great. They're a fantastic franchise to deal with. But the reality is, we're looking at it right now. I think you're looking at Matt Eberflus in Chicago. I think you're looking at Mike McCarthy in Dallas. Jerry Jones, not known for firing coaches in season, but he's already into the last year of his deal. If they were to lose to the New York Giants on Thursday Night Football and slip to 1-3, we shall see. And then, and Doug Peterson, I think there's 3 contenders at the top there. And I think Peterson, given the fact that there's no wins on the board right now, and given the fact that they've got $250 million invested in the quarterback who is not climbing and is not ascending and is not elevating his play, despite Peterson's history with the offensive side of the ball and with quarterbacks, that's highly concerning. You can see how the narrative would move there rather quickly. That's my view on it, and I'll get yours in a sec. As for Bill Belichick, the most likely spot, look, I think the Dallas Cowboys, if they move on from Mike McCarthy, could do far worse than Bill Belichick and all he's achieved. But I still don't see that Jerry-Bill dynamic working with the control, the merit, and the credit that Jerry Jones seeks in that organization, not to mention the clearing out of some of that front office that would need to happen. I can't see a Will McClay necessarily staying in there, who's the best thing they have going in that front office and has been for a long time, responsible for the best picks and best talent acquisition that they've conducted over the past 10 or so years, and is well regarded around the league. Losing him with a Belichick coming in doesn't really make sense. I think New York Giants makes a ton of sense, though, with the reverence and the shared history that Bill Belichick and the Giants franchise have together. That would be my pick for where he would go.
Yeah, of those, I agree. Belichick would not cede general manager influence to a Jerry Jones, especially given the repeated sample size from just this offseason. Stubbornness cost them. I mean, Laws, you tell me, 12 to 15 million combined per annum for CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott.
12 to
That is
15
a
million
high
per annum.
caliber player or multiple
That's 3
contributors
Derrick Henrys, Phil.
that you could have had.
Derrick Henry's cap hit is $5 million this year. Derrick Henry's cap hit this year is a little bit less than Trey Lance's, who is inactive each week.
So
as my friend Bobby Bell
that mismanagement. As far as Doug Peterson, he's on the hot seat at the moment.
Yeah.
It's one thing to lose in Buffalo. It's another thing to not be competitive. And we've seen the Jags blow a 17-point halftime or 14-point first half lead. We saw them come out of the gates and just on their face in Cleveland.
Correct.
The Browns only win in 2 otherwise underwhelming performances for Cleveland. And then the Jags weren't competitive. If you took the logos off the helmet and did a blind CV of the Jags, you might think they were the Panthers. And it was like what the Panthers were meant to be, one of the worst teams in the NFL. And they have $200 million guaranteed tied up at quarterback. So he's not going anywhere.
And they have the Texans next.
Texans, then Colts.
And
they
then
have 2 division games back to back.
And then Bears, if you're looking at young quarterbacks, and maybe that Bears Jaguars game, if Eberflus and Peterson both make it there, that might be a loser leaves town from a head coaching standpoint. Bowl.
Laz, I think it's a situation in which, as I'm just going to get ready for popular demand, I think it's a situation in which if they're 0-5, if they don't find a way to upset Houston, I think they're 5-point dogs there. And they might be favored against the Colts, depending on how things go coming out of Houston. But if they're waking up week 5 and they're 0-5, and you look across the division and the Colts are maybe starting to figure things out with their young quarterback and the Texans are starting to look like themselves, it's going to be no time like that. We don't even know who's calling the plays for Jacksonville. They're being weird about who between Doug Peterson and Press Taylor is it first half, second half. There's so much inconsistency, and that starts to be, that's when it starts to be, genius management to mismanagement is where you start to draw those lines between those things. So
we're running late. We're running long. Not late, just long. We're enjoying ourselves. It's a lot of fun show here. I want to get one because it has been sitting there for a sec. We do love to imbibe in a little of the fantasy here, and we've got a question, a little start sit that happened to weigh in. His start 2 this week from Parker, DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers, Devonta Smith, or Devin Singletary. For me, I'm just going to keep this real simple. I'm starting DK Metcalf right now with his big playability. He's clearly ascended to that number 1 spot, or he's cemented that number 1 spot, really, with Tyler Lockett falling off, Jackson Smith and Jigba elevating. But I think DK Metcalf, his ability to, break one off downfield and almost win you a week in one play, as well as the just the load he is after the catch with some of the shorter stuff that he's being featured on. They're moving him around the formation quite a bit, which is interesting. And I'm starting Devin Singletary. We'll get into that in just a sec. But if you are a running back playing the Dallas Cowboys, a starting running back, hell, maybe even a backup running back, I'm probably starting you in fantasy.
Laz, I worry about game script with Singletary. I'll go DK and Flowers.
Interesting.
I think the Ravens, they're not going to be in a position like they were this week, up 22 in the fourth quarter. I think they're going to have to be throwing late in Buffalo Monday morning on ESPN. I'll pick both ESPN primetime games. Hell, DK Metcalf in Seattle in Detroit. I'll be on the sideline for that.
Good games.
Geno Smith looked awesome throwing over the middle, and Detroit's secondary, despite a couple interceptions, I'm still a little worried if Aiden Hutchinson himself doesn't take down the quarterback, what happens once Geno Smith releases the ball. And Zay Flowers are my tips there. So if you love me, go with DK and Flowers. If you love Laz, go with DK and Singletary. If you love us both the same, flip a coin. We love doing that on the show. Well, Laz, that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Brekkie Show extended version with the wide receiver draft and a hot take hotline brought to you by Macca's with the phones ringing off the hook. We thank you all for participating. Very active comment section, a lot of fun. Hey, let's do it again. Same time, same place next week with another sample size for us to make outrageous confident claims, or at least just continue the NFL conversation, because this league is ever evolving. My favorite league to cover on the planet. Whole bunch of fun, and I'm glad that our shared passion, the Pacific Ocean is not enough to separate the shared passion we have for the NFL. So for all of you watching by laws in New South Wales, or whether you're a little further south in Victoria, Auckland, wherever it may be, or here stateside, thank you for hanging out with us on this edition of the NFL Brekkie Show following week 3, setting up week 4. We will see you next week.